Okay, well, now we come to the second film in the series, titled Justice League The New Frontier. Now, right away, my opinion on this is it's not bad, but it's just not for me, and I will elaborate on that. It's basically an adaptation of the DC Comics series DC New Frontier, and it was basically ushered in a new age of comics, and it takes place over the course of several years. It takes place during the 50s, roughly between the early 50s to about 1960. So, like I said, it basically deals with the Justice League and their exploits in Cold War America, and how people are generally distrustful of superheroes, while at the same time, certain figures like Wonder Woman and Superman are just having a lot of trouble staying anonymous and staying out of affairs. And simultaneously, in addition to that, there are also a few new heroes like Hal Jordan and the Martian Manhunter, who are making their first appearances in response to a global threat from aliens, I believe. All right, so what do I like about this movie? Well, first of all, this movie has a really good cast, and it seems to be balanced fairly well between traditional voice actors and big time Hollywood actors. I mean, you could make the argument that, yeah, they are casting celebrities in these roles, but unlike something like casting Miranda Cosgrove in Despicable Me or Keke Palmer in Ice Age 4, this doesn't really seem like a cash grab to cash in on the popularity of these celebrities, because these aren't necessarily household names, at least not to these comic book fans, at least not to these target audiences, because people like, I don't know, Vicki Lewis are not going to register. Vicki Lewis and John Hurd are not going to register in a commercial nearly as much as someone like Colin Farrell or Miranda Cosgrove or Miley Cyrus, people who are popular. So whenever Andrea Romano chooses to cast quote unquote celebrities in these roles, it doesn't feel exploitative of their popularity. It feels like she genuinely believes that they can do a good job. They can put their own stamp on the character. Now, more often than not, I think it works out, and I think it does work out in this movie, because there's David Boreanaz as Hal Jordan, aka Green Lantern. This is somewhat of an origin story for him, because he starts off as a pilot who comes across the dying alien Abin Sur, and Abin Sur passes along his ring to Hal, and he becomes the new Green Lantern for this sector, or this quadrant, I forget which one. But Miguel Ferrer as John Jones, aka the Martian Manhunter, Neil Patrick Harris as Barry Allen, aka the Flash, John Hurd as Ace Morgan, Lucy Lawless as Wonder Woman. Ideal casting? I think so, considering how one of her best known roles is Xena Warrior Princess. Again, never watched it, but I know of it. I know of it in the same way that I know of Kevin Sorbo's role as Hercules. Never watched Kevin Sorbo as Hercules, but I know he played the role. Let's see, Kyle MacLachlan as Superman. You have who else? You have Keith David as the narrator. Like I said, you have Vicki Lewis as Iris West, who is the Flash's girlfriend. Jeremy Sisto as Batman. Who else? You have Brooke Shields as Carol Ferris, the Green Lantern's girlfriend slash boss. She could probably play Carol Ferris live action. Or maybe if she was a little younger, but I've always liked Brooke Shields, so I'm not complaining about this cast. This cast is a fine cast, and they all do a good job. David Boreanaz lends his own brand of humanity to the character of Hal Jordan. Miguel Ferrer finds a nice balance between exotic and tough for J'onn J'onzz, although I think he sounds a little too terrestrial. I mean, I think J'onn J'onzz should sound a little bit more, for lack of a better phrase, like an alien. A little more foreign. I'm not saying he has to have this really thick accent, but I just think he should sound a little bit more alien. But as it is, Miguel Ferrer does a pretty good job. John Hurd does a fine job. Lucy Lawless does a really good job as Wonder Woman. She's actually one of the better voice roles for Wonder Woman in recent years. Jeremy Sisto, I'm kind of against as Batman. He sounds like he has a throat problem, and I'm not talking about the Christian Bale Batman like, "Where's the detonator?" No, I'm not talking about that. But every single line that Jeremy Sisto says as Batman, he says it in this raspy whisper. Have you finished your homework yet, Robin? Can you raise your voice, please? And I understand what he was going for, because it's the character of Batman. He dwells in the shadows. He's not exactly a loud guy, but I just think Sisto's approach was a little off. It came off as a little too understated and kind of misguided. Brooke Shields does a really, really solid job as Carol Ferris. So much so that she's probably my favorite version of the character. I would actually like to see her as Star Sapphire, which is the alter ego that the character eventually takes when she and Hal Jordan have their falling out. I mean, I would like to see what Brooke Shields does with Star Sapphire. But as of yet, they haven't really followed up on this, so all of these guys are great. All these guys are really good in their roles, with a few exceptions. But the problem is, this movie, it goes back to the fundamental problem that a lot of these movies have, in that they are too short. This movie is, how long is this thing? It's 75 minutes. 75 minutes to tell a story that not only takes place over the course of several years, but also focuses on like 6 or 7 different leading characters. As a result, not all of these character stories feel completely underdeveloped, because the movie constantly shifts between these characters with seemingly no rhyme or reason to it. Not enough time is given to their individual conflicts. A lot of their plot lines are pretty rapid fire in comparison to the time it would take if they were in a standalone movie or if they were in a solo movie. And a lot of the time the movie doesn't really feel like it's trying to tell meaningful stories around these characters so much as it's trying to tell their stories in a way where they can eventually become the Justice League. There's there's just not enough time devoted to each of these characters. Again, because of the short runtime, they have to cram this big long running story into a 70 to 80 minute movie. So you're not really allowed to digest any of the plot lines that come up. You're not allowed to digest any of the twists. You're not allowed to digest anything really. I mean, yeah, the voice actors do a good job, and you can get a general picture of each character by the end, which I still think is pretty impressive given the obvious limitations, but nowhere near as you don't care for these characters anywhere near as much as you would have if this thing was a little longer, or if these characters were each in their own standalone movie. This movie feels like a mess because, like I said, it constantly shifts between these characters in what seems like a very random pattern. There is no pattern. It just, I mean, one minute you'll be telling the story of Martian Manhunter's arrival to Earth, then you'll switch over to Superman, then you might switch over to Hal Jordan, then you might switch over to Batman, then you might switch over to Flash, then you might switch back to Manhunter, then you might switch over to Hal Jordan again, then back to Superman and Wonder Woman and what they're doing, then Flash and then Batman, and then maybe a side character like I don't know, Colonel Rick Flag, or maybe I don't know. It just feels like a mess. And again, as a result of the short runtime, there's not really enough in the way of exposition. I can applaud not wanting to bog the whole movie down in okay, this is happening now, and this is happening, and we have to do this, and we have to go here, and we have to do this. I can applaud the fact that the writers obviously want to tell a story with actual characters and not just exposition. But a lot of the time, the exposition that they do give ties the story together in very loose knots. Again, because it jumps around so much, they are very, very loosely connected, these individual character segments. And also, as a result of the shortage of exposition, there's not really enough time as is probably needed to properly establish what these characters can do. I mean, if you've never heard of these characters before, you will be completely lost. I mean, if you have never heard of Green Lantern before, then you will not know what his deal is. If you've never heard of Superman, or that's probably a bad example. Everyone's heard of Superman, but if you don't know what Superman can do, if you don't know what Wonder Woman can do, if you don't know what Batman can do, if you don't know anything about Flash or Martian Manhunter, then this movie does nothing to make for a smooth viewing experience for the uninitiated. I knew what was going on. I knew what each character's deal was. I knew what their personalities were, and I was able to appreciate that the voice actors did capture their personalities relatively well. But for someone coming off the street who is not at all a comic book fan, or not at all knowledgeable about these characters, I don't really know how well this movie is going to register. My guess is not very well. But with that said, there is a certain charm to the movie that clearly didn't register with me because of my taste. I'm not really a huge fan of. Okay, so a lot of the designs in this movie, the character models and whatever, are very 50s. You can tell by the designs of these characters that this was meant to be more of an old-timey movie. It takes place with the art style and the music and with everything else. You basically buy the time period in which this thing is set, i.e. the 50s all the way to the 60s during the Cold War, right down to the John F. Kennedy speech at the end. And while it's an interesting angle to tie together fear of superheroes with fear of mutually assured destruction via the Cold War, again, the writing never really allows these things to be intertwined in any meaningful way because it's trying to tell all of these individual stories and subsequently tie them together very loosely. And as a result, they can't really connect it to the Cold War angle that they were obviously going for as much as they should. But with that said, there is a certain charm to the whole 50s aesthetic that this film presents. And the reason I don't really like it all that much is not because it does the 50s thing badly, it's just I don't really like the 50s designs. I I can think of I can think of many people who do like these designs. Who do like the classic Wonder Woman design, who like the classic Superman, who like the classic Batman with the Batmobile just with a big bat face on the front, this big bat shaped bumper. Um, so so when I say that I don't really like the art style and the whole design of the movie, that's just my taste. So so if you do like these designs, then you will probably get more out of this movie than I did. And like I said, this is a movie only, at least in terms of its story, it's only for the initiated. It's only for those who know what's going on. It's only for it's strictly for comic book fans and fans of this storyline. Otherwise, someone just walking in completely unaware will stay unaware and they will feel very confused. But there's enough here to keep you entertained. You won't you won't be necessarily angry at this movie, you will just be lost. But for comic book fans out there, this considering what they had to do and considering the in retrospect kind of misguided attempt to cram all of this story into a 70 to 80 minute movie, taking that into consideration, they do a relatively good job. Um, I have to kind of give them the benefit of the. I have to kind of give them credit for basically doing the best they could, because the 50s designs are nice to look at. A lot of people can get more into them than I can. And for those who actually know what's going on, for those who have read the series New Frontier, then again you will get more out of it than I did. The voice acting is really good. The the action scenes are well animated. They're thrilling. The music suits the time period. It's almost kind of pulpy and cheesy, but not really. It finds a nice balance between the two. So yeah, is it anything I'm in a rush to see again? Not really. But I think a portion of that, I'm not saying all of it, but a portion of that has to do with me just not really being a fan of the source material or the time period in terms of the design. Because like I said, this is not a perfect movie. This is not just me hating on it because I just don't like it. It has genuine problems in telling the story and properly establishing these characters and tying it all together. But again, that has to do with the fundamental problem of trying to cram all this into a 70, 80 minute movie. I'm just going round in circles at this point, but if hopefully from this you can determine whether or not you will like it or not. I like parts of it, and and if I was a and if I was more of a fan of the aesthetic, then I could probably get into it more. But but as it is, it's not really something I'm in the mood to watch again. At If I were to slap a rating on it, I would probably just say it was okay. It's okay, all things considered. So take that for what it's worth, and I will be back with whatever's next on the list.